They found her on the far edge of the canyon, small, cornered, and breathing in short, panicked bursts. Two full-grown leopards had her trapped, their shadows stretching across the rocks like hunting ghosts. But something in her eyes wasn't fear, it was calculation. What happened in the next 90 seconds would defy every rule of predator and prey. The air was electric, the silence broken only by the scrape of claws on stone. No one watching could believe how this standoff ended, and no one could have predicted who would walk away. Before we begin, make sure you're part of our journey. Hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell so you never miss a moment like this. Your support helps us bring more incredible wildlife encounters to life, moments that keep you holding your breath until the very end. The morning light crept into the painted sky sanctuary in long, slanting beams, catching in the dust that hung suspended over the ground. The air was cool, not cold, but still held the faint bite of desert night. Everything felt as it always did, quiet, measured, in rhythm with the lives it sheltered. Beyond the fence lines, the Arizona scrub stretched toward the horizon, dotted with creosote and the sharp silhouettes of Joshua trees. Inside, the world was a patchwork of enclosures, shaded groves, and open runs, each carefully built to mimic the wild as closely as human hands could manage. At the far edge of the property, where the chain-link fence bent toward a thicket of mesquite, the leopard enclosure lay still. Isla, the older female leopard who had been rescued from a private collector years ago, lay sprawled on the flat rock she favored in the mornings, her coat catching the first light in a shimmer of gold and black. She was calm, but her gaze followed everything. She had been wild once, wild enough to survive her first 3 years in a poacher's shadow, so nothing in her world ever truly escaped her notice. Near the fence, a low creak broke the quiet. It was the kind of sound you might ignore if you weren't looking for trouble. A thin gust pushed through the brush, carrying with it the faint metallic chime of something shifting. And then it happened. A hinge, not secured the night before, swung just far enough for the gate to part. The sanctuary had strict rules, and the people who worked here were meticulous. But rules are only as strong as the smallest mistake, and last night, after a long, chaotic day moving rescued owls into a new aviary, someone had forgotten to slide the final chain-link latch into place. The gap was narrow, no more than the width of a human hand, but it didn't need to be more than that. Rowan came first. He was young, maybe 7 months old, a bobcat barely through the fluff of kittenhood, but already carrying the sinewy strength of the desert. His tail was short and ringed, his fur a dusty gray-brown that melted into the scrub around him. For weeks now, he'd been lingering beyond the sanctuary's outer boundary, drawn by the smell of food and the strange chorus of animal calls inside. Bobcats were cautious by nature, but hunger and curiosity are powerful things. Rowan slipped through the gap without hesitation, flattening himself against the fence post as he scanned the space. His tufted ears flicked toward Isla's enclosure. She was awake now, her head lifted, her golden eyes fixed on the little intruder. No hiss, no growl, just a slow narrowing of her gaze, a weight of attention that pinned him in place. For a heartbeat, the scene was frozen, desert silence, two predators separated by a few meters of dust and air. Then Rowan moved, not away, but forward, the way wild animals sometimes do when their instincts pull them somewhere their mind hasn't caught up to yet. His paws made no sound over the hard earth as he crept toward the enclosure's edge. Isla rose, stepping down from her rock in one fluid motion. Her muscles rolled under her coat, each movement silent, deliberate. Her tail flicked once, twice. Rowan froze again, his heart pounding in his chest, every instinct screaming that this was a bad idea. But something in Isla's stillness kept him rooted. Inside the main building, the sanctuary's manager, Mara, was filling out morning intake logs. She had no idea that a young bobcat was now standing less than 6 feet from one of her most unpredictable residents. No one saw the gate swing wider when another gust rolled through. No one heard the faint scrape as the lower corner of the fence shifted against the sand. Rowan's nose twitched as he caught the scent of fresh meat, yesterday's feeding leftovers. It was enough to pull him closer to the fence, his paw brushing the first line of shade cast by the mesh. Isla's whiskers shifted forward. For a moment, her head tilted slightly, not in threat, but in something stranger, curiosity. Beyond them, on the opposite side of the property, the sound of a utility truck pulling into the drive masked the first soft click of claws against metal. Rowan was testing the lower gap in the mesh panel, not understanding that leopards didn't need much space to change the shape of a morning forever. Isla moved without warning. She didn't lunge, not yet. It was more of a ripple, her body flowing forward until her nose was almost touching the fence, her eyes locked on the bobcats. Rowan's fur bristled along his spine, but his paws stayed planted. His world had shrunk to her gaze, and the faint sound of her breathing through the mesh. And then, another sound. Not from Isla, but from somewhere behind Rowan. He turned, ears pivoting sharply, and froze again. Two shapes were coming through the open gate. These were not leopards, and they were not alone. In the wild, bobcats rarely face multiple leopards, but this wasn't the wild, not in the usual sense. The sanctuary's lower enclosures were connected, and the gap in the fence had done more than let Rowan in. It had opened a passage between spaces meant to be separate. By the time Mara stepped outside with her coffee, the scene she found made her blood run cold. Rowan was trapped between Isla on one side and two younger leopards, rescues from a defunct roadside zoo, on the other. The air was heavy, the kind of silence that comes just before something breaks. Isla's eyes never left Rowan, but her body had shifted, angling subtly between him and the approaching leopards. It wasn't protection, not yet, but it wasn't aggression either. Somewhere, far across the property, a door slammed. A bird took flight, its wings cutting through the stillness like a warning. And at the heart of it all, a gate swung open on its hinges, whispering the same truth over and over. Someone had left it this way, and whatever happened next would be because of that. The desert doesn't wait for humans to notice their mistakes. The air changed the moment they left the old irrigation ditch. It wasn't something you could see, not yet, but you could feel it. A weight, a stillness. The tall golden grass ahead swayed in the wind like slow breathing, but the sound beneath it was wrong. No meadowlarks, no distant rustle of guinea fowl, just the scrape of dry stalks against each other and the faint, irregular crack of twigs somewhere beyond sight. Daniel knew enough about the backcountry to recognize the signs. This was hunting ground, active hunting ground, and not the kind claimed by timid jackals or solitary caracals. Whatever lived here didn't bother to hide its presence. It owned this place. The bobcat hesitated at the edge of the grass, every muscle tight under its dusty gray-brown fur. Its short, ringed tail flicked once, twice, and then froze mid-motion. Upright ears rotated forward, their black markings catching the sun. Daniel stopped walking, crouching slightly to match the animal's stillness, his camera bag pressing into his ribs. They weren't supposed to be here. That much was clear now. But the way back had already disappeared into a tangle of thornbush and ravine shadows. The only route Daniel could see was forward, through this open stretch of grassland that seemed far too quiet for comfort. He scanned the horizon, eyes narrowing. The ridge ahead was a soft rise, dotted with dark shapes. Rocks, maybe. But rocks didn't move against the light. One of the shapes lifted its head. Even at a distance, the outline was unmistakable. The sleek, spotted body, the long, lazy tail curling behind. A leopard, lying half in shadow. Daniel's pulse stuttered. He glanced at the bobcat, but it was already watching the same spot, body low, whiskers twitching. Then, movement on the ridge. Another head lifted. Another set of amber eyes caught the light. Two leopards. They weren't charging. Not yet. But they weren't retreating either. The larger one stretched, muscles rippling under rosette fur, and began a slow, deliberate descent from the ridge. The second followed, head low, tail swaying side to side in a rhythm Daniel had seen before, predatory, calculating. The bobcat stepped backward, the pads of its paws silent in the dust. It wasn't afraid, not exactly, but it was wary. This was no casual encounter. Leopards didn't ignore strangers in their core range. The wind shifted. Daniel caught it a split second before the cats did, the faint metallic tang of water, carried from somewhere far off. But the change in breeze also carried their scent toward the leopards. Heads lifted, nostrils flared, and then, as if by unspoken agreement, the two big cats changed their pace. What had been a slow, almost indifferent approach sharpened. Shoulders rolled forward. Steps quickened. They weren't circling. They were coming straight for them. Daniel's instinct screamed to run, but he knew better. Predators chased moving targets. His only hope was to look larger, more confident, more unshakable than he felt. But the bobcat wasn't thinking about posturing. It was already pivoting, slipping into the grass in a crouched, fluid motion. "Wait," Daniel hissed under his breath, though the word was useless. The animal was already threading its way into the cover, silent but not invisible. The grass bent with each step, the faint disturbance enough for trained hunters to follow. A low, guttural sound rolled over the plain, half growl, half rumble. The first leopard had closed half the distance, its head now level with its shoulders. The second moved in a wide arc to the right, cutting off the path Daniel had hoped might lead back toward the ravine. He could feel the shape of the trap forming. These cats weren't rushing recklessly, they were herding. The bobcat froze again, head snapping toward the right. Daniel followed its gaze and saw it. A flicker of movement closer than the leopards, low and fast through the grass. For one fractured moment, his mind refused to name it. Then it appeared, fully, between the grass stems. A third leopard, younger but no less intent. They were surrounded. The bobcat's ears flattened, a silent signal Daniel didn't miss. This was the moment, the split second between tension and chaos, when everything could still change. And then the first leopard's tail gave a single, sharp flick. The attack began. Grass erupted as the lead leopard lunged forward, the ground trembling under its weight. The second swept in from the flank, cutting a wide path through the stalks. The younger one came low, fast, aimed directly for the bobcat. Daniel's body moved before thought caught up. He swung his camera bag off his shoulder and hurled it into the space between the approaching predators, the canvas thudding against the ground with a spray of dust. The lead leopard hesitated, just enough. The bobcat bolted, threading the only gap left open, a narrow sliver between the second and third leopard. Daniel followed, heart pounding, the dry grass clawing at his clothes. Behind them, a snarl tore the air, followed by the heavy, rapid thump of paws giving chase. They weren't safe yet, not even close. The land ahead dipped sharply, revealing a dark cut in the earth, a shallow gully snaking away toward the scent of water. The bobcat didn't hesitate, leaping down and vanishing from sight. Daniel slid after it, boots scraping rock, dust filling his mouth. For a moment, they were hidden. The sounds above were muffled by the gully walls, but the tremor in the ground said enough. The leopards were still moving, still hunting. Daniel pressed his back to the dirt, breathing hard. The bobcat crouched a few feet away, chest heaving, eyes locked on the curve of the gully ahead. Somewhere beyond that bend, either safety or another dead end waited. And in the heavy silence, broken only by the whisper of wind over grass, Daniel knew this was far from over. The desert sun had climbed higher now, beating down on the rocky outcrop where the bobcat had taken refuge. The shadows here were sparse and short, leaving little cover but offering a clear view of the dry wash below, where the earth had cracked open like an ancient scar. The bobcat's breath came in quick, shallow bursts, its muscles coiled and ready for the next desperate move. But the leopards were not far behind. The three leopards spread out with an eerie precision, their bodies low and fluid as they circled the perimeter of the outcrop. Despite their obvious power and size, there was something cautious in their movements, a strange hesitation in the way their amber eyes flicked between the bobcat and each other. The youngest, smaller but no less fierce, prowled closer, nostrils flaring as it tried to decipher the strange scent of the smaller feline. Minutes stretched like hours as the tension hung thick in the dry air. The bobcat's gaze darted back and forth, searching for any sign of an opening or an escape route, but the circle tightened slowly, inexorably. There was no roar or snarl, no immediate rush to violence. Instead, the scene held a fragile balance, as if both sides were waiting for an unspoken signal. Then, from the edge of the wash, the bobcat's attention shifted to a sudden rustling sound, soft, tentative, and unmistakably feline. Through the dust and heat shimmer, for small shapes bounded clumsily into view, their movements a chaotic mix of clumsy energy and raw curiosity. The cubs, these young lions, barely months old, were the sanctuary's most unpredictable inhabitants, each one a bundle of endless motion and unfiltered emotion. Their golden eyes sparkled with excitement as they tumbled over each other near the water's edge, chirping and mewing with all the innocence of youth. They had been restless since their mother's absence earlier that morning, a fact not lost on the sanctuary's keepers. To the bobcat's bewilderment, the cub's attention turned immediately toward it. There was no fear, no caution. Instead, their young faces lit with hope, as if this small stranger carried the warmth and comfort they desperately sought. One cub, the boldest of the group, stepped forward with tentative paws, its tiny head tilting as it sniffed the air between them. It emitted a soft, almost pleading sound, half mew, half chirp. The bobcat stiffened, its instincts screaming warning signals. But the cubs didn't heed the usual rules of wild encounters. They weren't acting as hunters or prey. They were seeking something else, a mother's presence. The cautious approach of the cubs turned to affectionate gestures. One rolled onto its side and extended a paw, brushing it softly against the bobcat's flank. Another nestled its head near the bobcat's neck, purring a low, rumbling song that vibrated through the hot air. Despite the bobcat's initial tension, the unexpected tenderness began to chip away at its fear. Surrounded by this warmth and clumsy affection, the bobcat's body slowly relaxed. Its ears, which had been pinned tightly against its skull, twitched uncertainly. Its stiff posture softened into one of reluctant acceptance. Though it remained alert, eyes scanning constantly for any sign of threat, it allowed the cub's closeness. The leopards watched from the perimeter, their eyes betraying a mixture of confusion and relief. They had expected hostility, a fight to the death perhaps, but found instead a fragile peace, woven together by misunderstanding and necessity. The cubs, in their youthful naivete, had mistaken the lone bobcat for the mother they missed, the source of the comfort and security that had vanished with her. Time slowed as the strange family settled into an uneasy but genuine bond. The bobcat let out a low, hesitant rumble, a purr not unlike the lion's, though rougher and less practiced, as if awakening a long-dormant instinct. The cubs responded in kind, pressing closer, their purring chorus filling the space between predator and prey. From a distance, the sanctuary keepers watched in silent awe, unsure of what to expect next, but moved by the profound tenderness unfolding before them. What began as a potential tragedy had become a moment of unexpected grace. But nature, ever unpredictable, would not allow this fragile harmony to last forever. The scent of their returning mother rippled through the air, carried on the dry desert wind like a herald of change. The cubs stirred, eyes wide and bright, their small bodies shifting with anticipation. The bobcat sensed it too, the promise of safety, but also the imminent end of this strange, accidental family. With a reluctant glance, it rose, muscles taut once more, as the world prepared to turn again. For a brief moment, under the unforgiving sun, the lines between species blurred, and a solitary bobcat became something more, a mother, a guardian, a symbol of unexpected compassion in a harsh and wild landscape. The afternoon sun hung low, casting long shadows across the sanctuary's rugged landscape. The air was heavy with the scent of dust and dry earth, mingling with the faint trace of the river that snaked its way through the valley below. The fragile peace that had settled over the bobcat and the lion cubs was now facing its inevitable test. The sound of a distant engine grew louder, breaking the natural silence like a ripple across still water. The returning matriarch was near. Her presence was a beacon that pulled the cubs' attention away from their unlikely guardian. Their joyous yelps and eager scrambling disrupted the calm, reminding the bobcat that this borrowed moment was nearing its end. The bobcat's muscles tensed once again, the instinct to retreat now battling with a surprising reluctance born of the soft touches and warm nudges that had softened its wary heart. The keepers approached cautiously, their footsteps muffled against the rocky ground. Among them, a tall figure carried a package wrapped in the sanctuary's signature cloth, a lure crafted from the finest catch, a thick fillet of fresh salmon, its rich aroma already reaching the bobcat's sensitive nose. It was a gentle promise, a call that transcended words and warnings, something that could coax even the most stubborn spirit to safety. From the shaded vantage point, the bobcat's eyes flickered toward the scent, its nose wrinkling in recognition. The scent was a siren's song, awakening a hunger that momentarily overpowered the confusion of the day. Slowly, almost reluctantly, it began to disentangle itself from the warm embrace of the cubs, stepping carefully away as if parting from an old friend. The cubs emitted soft, confused murmurs, their playful paws reaching out in protest, but the bobcat ignored them, focused on the new promise before it. With measured grace, the bobcat padded toward the keepers, its movements cautious but deliberate. The golden eyes lifted once, catching the gaze of the nearest keeper, a silent exchange passing between them, a bond forged in shared understanding and respect. The bobcat's tail flicked in quiet surrender, its body language speaking of acceptance and a weariness born from the day's unexpected journey. As the bobcat slipped through the gate opened by the keepers, the cubs scattered toward their mother, who now stood nearby, still groggy but alert. Their reunion was a joyous chaos of nuzzles and purrs, a blur of golden fur and tiny claws. The bobcat paused for a moment, watching from a distance, before retreating into the sanctuary's quiet embrace. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky melted into hues of amber and violet, the bobcat returned to its familiar territory. Its fur bore traces of the day's encounter, dusted with the scent of lion and warmed by the touch of newfound companionship. The salmon had vanished long ago, leaving behind only the lingering taste of survival and a story that would be retold for years. The keepers gathered quietly nearby, sharing glances and soft smiles. They knew they had witnessed something rare, a gentle escape not marked by violence or fear, but by compassion and unexpected connection. The desert held many secrets, but few as poignant as the day when a solitary bobcat walked into leopard territory and found a family in the unlikeliest of places. In the quiet that followed, the sanctuary seemed to breathe a little easier, its wild heart beating steady once more. And for the bobcat, the day's journey had become more than a story of survival. It was a testament to the fragile threads of trust that weave through the fabric of the natural world.